The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
BronxTalk, now in its 17th year, one of the city's longest running TV talk shows. The phones are open, so please join in the discussion at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments or questions to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, in the month of October, people in the Highbridge section of the Bronx began to notice that the population housed at the 200-bed Stadium Family Center changed from families to men. Also, residents claim that this has led to a deterioration of conditions around the center for everyone. This issue, of course, resonates for a number of Bronx communities that have been grappling with unwanted facilities. We'll hear what some of the concerns are from the residents, and we'll also talk with a well-known Bronx attorney who has dealt with this sort of thing before. From the Citizens Activist Network, CAN, and he also heads the Stop the Violence campaign, Ernest Maldonado. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also the woman who actually contacted us first about the problem, Highbridge resident Agnes Johnson. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. And later on, we'll be joined by attorney Steve Kaufman. Ms. Johnson, let's start with you. You're the one who brought it up. You called me and emailed me and said, we've got a problem here, maybe you want to cover. So here you are, you have the floor. What's the problem? What's the issue?
First of all, it was families many years ago. The shelter became a place for mothers and babies in the last years that I have lived there. I don't know about how many years, about 10 years at least. It was mothers and babies. So the dramatic change to all male was quite visible to see. But it wasn't just the fact that it was all male, the fact that the community was not told at all. And we saw a parade of men with canes, with suitcases, some looking very ill, suddenly appearing all over the block leading down to the Promesa Men's Transitional Shelter. We noticed they took Yankee off the name of the stadium, and we went down there to see what was happening, and it was a huge gathering of men all around the shelter. And so we were very concerned as to what happened here, and we did all the right things. The first thing I said, well, let's call our community board. They must know what's happening here, and they claimed they didn't know anything. Let's call Mr. Diaz, our borough president, claimed they didn't know anything. We went all through the ranks, and no one could tell us what was happening there.
So what did happen? The city simply converted it, as I said at the opening of the show, from one thing to the other.
Exactly. It was converted sometime in end of October, early November, was converted to all male. We started to ask questions, and questions weren't answered.
The city has a shifting homeless population. The population was women and families, and now there are more men that need shelter than ever before. This is the new trend in homelessness, as I understand from various officials. If they need to convert that facility, what's the problem?
Well, the problem is when you have level 2 and 3 sex offenders, there are laws and guidelines to be followed, and that wasn't followed. And they didn't solve the homelessness for the women and children that were in there. They simply moved them to other locations. So they were just transferring one group of homeless with another group of homeless. Now, if there's an emergency, I understand on males.
This is a growing population.
Right.
You can't mix them in with families. These
Right,
are
exactly.
people who need a certain type of attention.
But these are
support.
people that need very specialized type of attention. We're not just talking about men that are unemployed and are down in the luck. And the whole point is we're not against people that are homeless. We're not saying we don't want homeless men in our backyard. We're saying if we find, and we did find, that they're level 2 and 3 sex offenders, and they're being just placed there, there's no notification, there's no impact study, there's no anything. They're just
Mr.
there.
Maldonado will bring you in a second. I just want to establish a couple of things. Do we know for sure that the precinct wasn't notified and other agencies or other people who needed to be notified weren't notified?
Well,
because, as I understand,
we're
the precinct's
taking from
supposed to track them.
Exactly. The precinct was supposed to let us know because that's supposedly the guideline under the Megan law. That wasn't done. Again, we were told no one knew. Other than you have to speak to DHS and you have to speak to PROMESA. So that's why we organized a big community meeting, hopefully, and we invited everyone to come and tell us something.
As I understand, again, this is what I've been told through the research I did, that 1 to 2% are sexual offenders. If you're looking at 200 people, you're looking at maybe 3 or 4. Number one, is that number, do you think it's accurate? And number two, if there's 4 out of 200, I realize it only takes 1 to have a problem, but isn't that something that could be handled properly?
But who's to say if it wasn't handled properly from the beginning? We found on the division of, what is that, the New York State Department of Criminology or whatever, they have to list there's 5 listed there already.
5 listed there.
Right.
Okay, so 5 out of the 200.
No, 5 level 3.
I see. So
That's
there
the
may be
highest level
others.
you can
I
go.
see.
So there's others level 2. So you question how honest are they being. Also,
There's a huge
right.
credibility problem
Exactly.
because certainly
and plus it
nobody
was
came.
done so secretively.
Mr. Maldonado, this is a quote from the Daily News article about this issue. The quote was, "They're trying to better their lives. They're under control. They take their meds. They go to group therapy. These are not bad people." From this Department of Homeless Services. They need a place. This is an available facility. Why not?
We're not questioning whether or not they're bad people. We believe, right, we've always taken a position that they deserve a place to stay, right? We're not being insensitive. We understand the situation. However, right, when you have a group of individuals, right, substance abusers, right, men with mental disabilities, right, then you got level 2 and 3 sex offenders, right? It's a transitional facility. At any given time, that number can fluctuate. 5 now, it could be 50 next week.
Because at least as far as you know, what Ms. Johnson said, there doesn't seem to be a control.
Okay. Another thing is that what we observing in the community says that this is a prescription for problems, right? We already experienced. We have them urinating in the streets.
That is happening. That's not just rumor.
No, this is not rumor. We've actually gone out and talked with the residents in the area. The residents are calling us, right? Masturbating, peeking in windows. Recently, a store owner was assaulted. When they miss their curfew, they are actually in hallways, sleeping
So
over.
in other words, they missed the curfew, then the doors are locked,
The
and they have
doors
no
are
place
locked.
to go. So now you've got somebody, I don't know, whatever the curfew is, midnight or 1
Wandering
o'clock,
around.
and they've got no place to go, and
Exactly.
so they're hanging
Exactly.
around.
So-
And this actually happens.
Yes.
This is an ongoing
Do
problem.
you or others call 311 or call the police and say, hey, I mean, because in my building, I know if we had somebody sleeping in the building or hanging around, we'd be calling around. Does that happen, and is there a response?
When we was doing an interview with New York, with Bronx 12, we talked with the task force lieutenant. The task force lieutenant actually told us that there's been a number of incidents, right, that have been reported by the 44 precinct, okay, as well as talking to community residents who have discussed that they have made complaints. How serious they're being taken, we don't believe they're being seriously taken because none of the behavior, even though we got a promise, right, that they would, and a demand from our council person in the area, Helen Foster, she actually sent a letter asking that the security be tightened.
Right.
The security has not been tightened. And you know, what a lot of the residents are outraged about is the fact that PROMESA Systems, Inc., right, has not even responded to any of these allegations.
Let me do this. We have just a couple of photographs that you folks brought, and I want to just show those so people might know the neighborhood or get a sense. So, Jane, if we could just pop those 3 pictures on the screen. That's the stadium center, and you're saying it had said something Yankee.
It said Yankee on the top.
On the top,
and you
but
see that's
no longer
missing.
gone. And then the next shot is, I guess, from the side.
through
And
the
if you
fence,
look
right.
closely, you can see people hanging around in front. And then the third, well, before you change that shot, this is a spot on the front of the Major Deegan Expressway. You know, just from the city, bring it back over here, and then we'll look at that last photograph in a minute. But if you look at that spot, the precinct is right next door. It's out of the way. It's not like they dropped this facility right in the middle of somebody's neighborhood. From the city's perspective, we've got a problem. We need a place to house these people. What's wrong with putting them in a relatively out-of-the-way place right next to a police precinct?
Well,
First Agnes and then Mr.
The problem
Dunn.
is it's very nicely isolated there, but they're not in jail. They have to leave in the morning, early in the morning. So at 7:30, you will see a long trail of men coming up 167th Street to University and to Ogden,
Back
to the
up
main,
the hill. Now
right,
that's
to
where
the
the
community.
third picture comes in. If we can pop that third picture up there, that'd be great. So you're saying is, all right, so that's where the center is,
Right.
but then there's a place, that's where it is, and that's the block.
That's coming up to University, so there's homeowners on that corner there. There are private homes on that street, and then as they come further up, they have to come to the subway, the bus stop, the subway, the supermarket.
So there's no denying
they're
that
joining
in
the community.
You wanted to respond, and I cut you off.
And it's even a greater problem than that. The biggest problem we have with this facility being placed here with the level 2 and 3 sex offenders and the young men with mental disabilities is the fact that it's located very close to 2 schools, right? PS 126 and PS 11.
When they come back up the hill on the picture we just saw, there are schools
within
in that area.
within
On
a
both
1,000
sides.
feet on both sides. Another thing is we have a school. We have a middle school that's been approved. That will be built by 2013. That will sit directly across from this facility.
Let's bring on Steve Kaufman, who's an attorney, of course, a former elected official. Always nice to have you on the phone, Mr. Kaufman. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm going to basically rephrase the question I had. The city's got a problem, and that is that there's a growing population of males who need services and need places to live. And they have this a place that is relatively out of the way. It's not in the center of a community, and there's a precinct right next door. Isn't there any sympathy for the city to say, you know what, this is really, unfortunately, the best place to put people like this?
No, you first of all, you have a city charter that has the law, and the city is obligated to obey the law. They totally ignore the charter. They have to give notification to the community. The people don't even know what's being housed in this homeless shelter. There was no ULURP proceeding. There was no impact statement. The city has no credibility.
No.
We don't know anything that's going on there. If it weren't for Agnes and Ernesto, who are two articulate, wonderful people who are able to say what the problem is, they would shove whatever they want into this shelter and totally ignore what the community wants and what the community has to say in violation of the city charter.
Now, what aspect of this violates the charter? Is it the
Everything.
Everything.
There's supposed to be notification.
You don't like any of it.
There's supposed to be a community board hearing.
The community board hearing when the shelter...
Nothing has happened.
A community board hearing when the shelter is simply shifted from families to men?
That simply is not a good adjective or adverb. It's a totally different shelter from abused women and children, which the community wants. They're not saying no, to mentally disturbed men who have criminal records, who walk around drug addicted in the community, urinating wherever they want, next to schools. This is not an isolated area. This is not an industrial area. This is in a neighborhood that's being violated by these men who wander around.
Can this be policed properly and managed properly so this works? Aside from the fact I realize you're not and others are not happy with the notification, can we get this in some kind of order so it works?
No, there's no trust or confidence in any of these organizations. Basics that was with the Westchester Square organization had violated all of its contracts with the city of New York and other agencies. We don't have any confidence in the ability of these social service organizations to maintain order or even rehabilitate some of these men.
What is the relationship between what is going on, or is there a relationship between what is going on here and what the battle that you had and frankly are still having over there at Westchester Square? And of course, there's another battle looming, a similar one up in Community Board 12. Is there a relationship between these?
I think there's a relationship between how the city views its inhabitants, where they just cram shelters. They're doing one in downtown, the same character, into a neighborhood where the people are up in arms. Mm-hmm. We've lost control over our government. This is why people feel alienated. Nobody talks to the people in the community. Nobody expresses any kind of interest. They ignore the people as if they were lunatics. And here you have two wonderful people, Agnes and Ernesto. They're more articulate than a dozen lawyers. But look at the frustration they have to put up with to get an answer from these agencies. And you know something, the homeless shelters, many are run by landlords who are getting triple rent. They're making a fortune. They go down and declare their buildings ready for a homeless shelter, and they make a fortune.
I'm going to
real business, Gary.
I'm going to just say tongue-in-cheek, gee, if they're more articulate, what do we need you for? But hang on there. That's just the Bronx and me coming out of it.
Right.
No, you spoke about the policing. One of the things that I think Helen Foster had put in her letter, that they'll just up the policing and have the police drive around a little bit more. That's not going to happen 24/7. You know, I stopped a gentleman from urinating right around the corner from the school.
But that must have been scary for you because you certainly don't want to take that chance.
Well, I'm concerned because children were coming out of school. So I'm saying, am I supposed to call the police? And say, oh, he's urinating, come and catch him quick. No, they are doing this because there is no bathroom for them, nothing in the community for them to use.
I want to take a phone call or two, but I do want to ask you, and either of you can respond. You had mentioned to me something about Promesa visiting businesses before we went on the air, and Mr. Kaufman referred to them and saying, well, they're getting the money for it. Well, isn't that a good thing if they're visiting businesses and saying, aren't you having a problem? We want to see if we can help the problems, etc.
The problem is that the store owner, in particular, there's a major drugstore right on the corner of 168th, and they were being visited by these men on a daily basis. They were coming in and stealing. They were coming in and drinking coffee or just sitting and refusing to leave.
They were stealing?
Yes, stealing.
Well, that, of course, is
exactly. So when they would try to get...
Not to say that's more or less of a problem than urinating in the street or something. But
well, like I say, it's again, out of control. So when they call the police are simply telling them, well, let them take what they want, don't risk your life, and just let them take and leave. I don't think that's the answer. Now, the woman in the store was punched in the face. Now, why Promesa came, I don't understand, because they
may be trying to solve, I'm just guessing, in their behalf, maybe they're trying to solve the problem or say, hey, is there a way we can help corral this problem?
Well, it amazes us because we met with all the politicians on Friday, and one of the requests we made of the politicians and our borough president was to visit this particular store owner and talk to them about the plight that they're suffering and the impact of this right now. Instead of that happening, which we were looking forward to happening today or tomorrow, instead Promesa agents come in to speak to her. Now, she doesn't know Promesa. She says, they're not my elected politicians. Why am I speaking to them? I want to speak to my elected politicians.
Mr. Maldonado, did you want to add something to what you're hearing here?
I want to add that we've heard all of the public officials from 16th Congressional District has actually stated that they had no idea that Promesa planned to place this shelter in this community, right? And we've taken a position that if this is the case, right, and if Helen Foster has verbally said on TV that she wants to have this facility removed, then we should have public hearings to determine why was all of the safeguards and all of the mandates actually suspended for this particular
Let's go to the telephone. Mark from Pelham Parkway. It's not your neighborhood, Mark, but I guess you had something to say. You always have something to say. How are you?
Well, hey, Gary and ladies and gentlemen, and Steve, if he's still on. I think the problem that we're having here is this is the same thing that they did in Westchester Square with the thing that Steve represented the people. The city is on this plan. I am convinced there's a conspiracy for the city totally to make the Bronx alienated from the other boroughs. I mean, you can see how we were treated with the snow blizzard. You can see what they shoved down our throats. I mean, anybody who watched what happened with...
well, I have to tell you that from the way I viewed the whole picture, Brooklyn and Queens had more problems with, not to say that we were treated tremendously, but Brooklyn and Queens neighborhoods had more problems with the snow than the Bronx.
But again, when you come down to that, it's the outer boroughs, Manhattan. I haven't seen, one question is, how come they don't try putting any of these shelters right in the east side of the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, right around the mayor's town? I think that would be a great place to put one.
Mark, did you have anything else? Because otherwise...
Well, no, because what I want to say is, look at what happened even on American Idol with that teenager.
Well, that's another issue, and we're going to talk about that on another show.
Well, no, what I'm talking about is this. You've got 24 to 32 million people watching this, and this is becoming the outside.
Mark, I don't want to deal with that.
And this relates to this.
I'm not going to deal with that tonight because I want
to. The Bronx is constantly being dumped on.
That's another story.
Gotta stop.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to.
He did make a point that's true, that's what this whole center has opened up for Highbridge. There has been dumping going on because there are sexual predators parked right across the street from PS 126. There have been 500, I think, over 500 parked throughout the Highbridge area, and there's been no notification, and they are level 2 and level 3.
Steve Kaufman, let me ask you this question, and you've obviously been around in the Bronx in a number of different positions. One suggestion that was put to me is that this siting of this facility in this way is a way of scaring people and getting people to move out, and that there is a real movement to gentrify this entire section of the Bronx, which you can see various evidences of it, where with the Gateway Mall, with what they've done with the Yankee Parks, with the opening of a tennis center that costs a lot of money to belong to. Do you think that's a real plan, or it's just a rumor that somebody's spreading unnecessarily? Do we have Steve Kaufman? Did I just give that whole intro? Well, I'll let you. What do you? He's there. Go ahead.
Friedman, a dictator, a judge who required the city to house homeless people immediately, and we need to fight against these kinds of willy-nilly decisions that determine our lifestyle and is destroying us because one person from above wants people to live a certain way. It's not fair. Community controls. There have to be hearings. There have to be impact statements. Live by the law. You have a law, abide by it. That's the issue, Gary.
Right, so you're not willing to take a larger vision of that.
Communities.
Right. You're not willing at this moment to take a larger vision. You want to just deal with it.
I do take a larger vision. They're destroying the Bronx. I'm not saying they deliberately want to gentrify neighborhoods, but what they're doing is destroying the Bronx.
Got it. Ernesto,
stop it.
Ernesto, Agnes, did you have a response to my question?
Let me just say, we've seen a Yankee Stadium being built for $1 billion. We see the Gateway Mall being built. We see affordable housing that's not affordable. Okay, we are the poorest congressional district in the entire United States. Annual salary, $17,000 a year. Most of it which being built is being built for families, right, which a minimum of $30,000, $50,000. Right. Most of the services that are coming into the Highbridge community and the 16 congressional districts are being catered to, are being spent on the shelters that are coming in for the city. Right. This area has been neglected for over 30 years. Okay.
So you're not directly going there, but you're saying
there's an effort on part of the public officials, right, the mayor's office, right, to dump in this community. You cannot say that as a congressman, as a senator, as a borough president, as a councilman, that you are unaware of what is being placed in your community, and if you are...
So wait, you're disputing something you said, or one of you said earlier, and that was that elected officials had said that
I don't believe
you
that.
don't believe it.
I do not believe it.
There's no way a third termer who overthrew the term limits that we voted on twice can sit in front of me and
Well,
tell
that's
me
different
she
than the
didn't know
elected
200. I'm talking about an elected official, okay, a city
you're
council
talking
member.
about the council member Foster.
Exactly. Now, again, you have to ask
You're
yourself.
saying that she didn't know?
That's what she's saying.
Well,
I'm saying
and
I
you
can't believe
you
it.
don't believe it?
I don't believe
I don't
it.
believe
I
it
don't believe
either.
in the least. Also, I have to
well,
ask.
that's a
I have to
different issue,
understand.
of course,
I have
but-
to ask. This is definitely not a stabilizing force coming into the neighborhood. This is not a contribution to anything positive. Now, if this
Well, I
is
don't
the
think
poorest,
nobody's
this is the
disputing that.
poorest neighborhood. And this has been found in the Measure of America, the study that comes out every year. It's called the Measure of America, how the communities are doing. It names the 16th district as one of the poorest.
Well, there's no
why
question about
then,
that.
if it is so poor and it needs so much, why would you bring in 200 men that cannot add anything to that? to help?
Mr. Kaufman, we're getting near the end of the show. What's the remedy here? Is it simply a lawsuit and they have to, hire an attorney maybe
No, I
like you
think,
or somebody?
That they need to get all the elected officials together, and the elected officials have to stand with the community and not waffle. They have to demand that this shelter be closed. Or they have to the city has to comport with the law that's been enacted, that there has to be notification, public hearings, and impact statements.
I must say that process is going to be made difficult if they keep talking that maybe the elected officials have some other interest in
these
it.
two articulate people being on your program, maybe they could change the mood of their elected
God,
officials.
Steve, we're going to thank you and tell you we'll see you around the Bronx somewhere. We appreciate your
Absolutely. They got
participation
to bring
tonight.
some warm weather, Gary.
So thank you. And Ms. Johnson, what is the remedy? What would
Well,
you like to see?
we did-
Because are you really going to move 200 people out?
We met with all the elected officials, sans Helen Foster, on Friday afternoon. They all came. We have 4 demands that we put forth.
Which are?
Number 1, we want the men relocated and we want the mothers and babies back. Number 2, we want, before any of this business is done again in Highbridge, that they follow the letter of the law. Number 3, we want all elected officials to be held accountable for what they did know. And number 4, any intimidation of people living in Highbridge reaching across to BronxNet or whatever is to stop.
Mr. Maldonado, you get the final word here. You're going to sue him? You're going to take him to court?
Well,
Is that because these are nice demands, but if you don't get it,
we are weighing our options. But at this point, we have discussed that issue. One of the things we want for sure is we want Helen Foster requests hearings to determine why was the procedures not followed.
Ernesto Maldonado, thank you. Agnes Johnson, thank you. Steve Kaufman, thank you. And to all our viewers, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, by the way, the For Information number is up there as well. You can email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of our program are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk. It's on the right-hand navigation bar. You can see all our old shows. Next week, an important informational show. We'll be bringing in a couple of healthcare experts to give you information on what exactly is in the healthcare reform bill. Nobody knows. And what are its implications for you and for me and for us here in the Bronx. Bronx Talk now in its 17th year, one of the longest-running weekly TV talk shows in New York City. Thanks to producer Jane Folloro, our director Michael Arias, our cast of thousands who put the show together, and to you too. Stay warm. Good night.
It's very vital that the community be involved with these types of productions.
It introduced me to the operations of camera, about field production.
It was like an extended version of going back to school for me.
I think BronxNet brought it out of me.
But BronxNet is a very good source for the regular citizen to just have that opportunity.
It's for the community, to be utilized by the community.
To present their side, their story through communications and through the television medium.
Voice your support to keep the channels open and strong. Online, visit bronxnet.org and click on Support Public Access Television. and sign the letter to your local representatives.
Our voices will be